Hello, baseball fans. I'm Mark Davidson. This is the Chatters Box, and on today's episode, I'm going to be grading the Rangers' wild 24-hour spending spree that capped off a really fun November. Now, right off the bat, I feel like I'm squinting into the sun looking at the Rangers roster trying to figure out what the front office sees. They just allocated $500 million to two players, $561.2 million in total to four players. Now, coming off an abysmal 60-win season that saw them trade away their one really good player in Joey Gallo. And forgive me, Rangers fans, for not giving your team's brass the benefit of the doubt, but this hasn't been the best run team in recent years. But I do want to give some credit to them for going out and getting the guys they wanted. They just spent a ton of money to bring in a ton of talent, which I think is fun for a large portion of a fan base. And those same fans should be excited knowing that unless the Rangers know that several of their currently rostered players are about to take significant steps forward in their performance, the Rangers will likely have to spend quite a bit more to contend in the AL West. Because right now, there's not much on the roster besides the players they've brought in, and their roster construction isn't too dissimilar from the Angels. And by this, I mean both rosters are built out of stars and scrubs. On the Angels, you have Ohtani, Trout, and Rendon, three guys projected to make up more than 40% of the team's projected 22 WAR. Likewise, Semien, Seager, and Gray appear poised to make up a similar chunk of the Rangers' projected WAR, at least 40%. But the Angels also have Syndergaard, Walsh, Stassi, Sandoval, and Iglesias, while the Rangers' supporting cast is Kiner Falefa, Nate Lowe, Dane Dunning, Kole Calhoun, and Adolis Garcia, who, by the way, only managed a 224, 274, 397 triple slash from June through the end of the season, which worked out to a measly 81 WRC+. And it's not that you shouldn't dream on guys like Nick Solak, Willie Calhoun, Spencer Howard, and AJ Alexy taking steps forward and immediate, meaningful impacts from prospects like Josh Jung. It's just that you need to be careful of how much of that Kool-Aid you ingest. And regardless of whether you're dangerously optimistic or not, certainly you'll agree the Rangers roster experiences a significantly bigger drop-off from their top players to their second tier than the Angels does. Now, while a stars and scrubs approach doesn't necessarily spell doom for a team, the teams who received at minimum 40% of their WAR from just three players in 2021 finished with an average of 70.7 wins. And ultimately, what my takeaway from this is that it's pretty far-fetched that a team, in this case the Rangers, could compete with the likes of the Astros without solid depth. And let's not forget the AL West is also home to the previously discussed Angels and even the rising Mariners, both teams who, as of this moment, look marginally superior to the Rangers. And I understand that the farm system looks better than it has in recent years, and they should have their last 4 first-round picks up by 2023, but this team does not have the reputation of developing their talent. In fact, now avert your eyes if your stomach is sensitive, this is not pretty. Here is a list of the Rangers' prospects over the last 10 years, the highest rankings on MLB's top 100 prospect list, and the WAR they've accumulated in the big leagues. Now, I'm not trying to crush optimism out of the gate, so while there's not a lot of carryover from the 2021 roster and there are no surefire prospects coming up from the system, one thing is certain, and that's the Rangers went out and bought their stars. In fact, transition, Marcus Semien has been the actual number one player in baseball over the last 3 seasons by WAR, compiling 15.4 WAR, a 128 WRC+, and the 5th most home runs in baseball over that time, all while contributing solid base running and fantastic defense up the middle. Now, he's only had 2 above average offensive seasons, 2019 and 2021, and the shape of his production shifted from a more all-around offensive game in 2019 to a more slugging-oriented approach in 2021, which he achieved by pulling the ball 16% more often compared to 2019 while hitting 23.7% more fly balls. Now, you might be thinking of the very in vogue term launch angle right now, but that's not exactly what Semien's change in approach represents. Pulling the ball in the air is definitely a way to access more power more often, but it's also kind of referred to as an old man's trick that older players may employ to hang on a little longer. See Joey Votto's 2021 for an example. And for sure, Semien's not old, but he is going into his age 31 season, and after finishing third in MVP voting twice over the last 3 years, Semien has almost definitely played his best baseball already. But he should remain productive for a few more years. Looking at what he did from 27 to 30, projections, historical comps, and aging curves have him producing at well above average for a few more years. My rudimentary projection system has him projected for right around 5 WAR next year, followed by a few years of comfortably above average baseball, and then, the end of his contract, which is pretty hard to project without future seasons. All told, especially when considering how durable he's been, having appeared in 98.2% of his team's games over 2018 to 2021, I think he probably comes really close to producing enough value to make this deal worth it from a dollar per WAR perspective. And I also think it is sincerely great that Semien got the long-term deal he deserved after proving that his 2019 was not a fluke with his monster 2021 campaign. The thing about this deal is that I'm just not convinced that this should have come from the Texas Rangers. Now sure, before this commitment, they only had $27.9 million on the books in 2022 and only $3.75 million guaranteed money owed in 2023. So while they had the money, it's still hard to reconcile their first move being such a long commitment to a player Semien's age. Semien would have made a lot more sense on the Yankees, Blue Jays, Red Sox, White Sox, hell, any team with decent depth who have already opened their contention window. Look, we kind of covered it already, but the Astros aren't going anywhere. The Angels are still rostering Ohtani and Trout, and the Mariners are on the rise. So looking at this move, I can see a world where Marcus Semien is actually closer to an average player by the time the Rangers are actually competing at the top of the AL West. Because of that, this acquisition is a C+ for me. But of course, Semien isn't the only monstrous addition the Rangers made, and I'm willing to bump up the Semien signing to a B- with the knowledge of other additions. Specifically, less than 24 hours after inking Semien, the Rangers locked up Kole Seager to a 10-year, $325 million deal, ostensibly vaulting their middle infield production into the same stratosphere of the Padres and the Rays. And yes, I'm including the Rays despite Franco not having even played half of a season yet, but that's how good Lau and Franco are. But where Semien has been a lock to play every day, Seager has been exceedingly absent from the Dodgers starting lineups over the last 4 years. Corey had Tommy John and hip surgeries in 2018, hip, hamstring, quad, and lower back problems in 2019, and had his hand broken by a pitch in 2021. All told, he's only appeared in 56.2 of the Dodgers' regular season games over the last 4 years. And either due to said injuries or due to his size, his defense has plummeted from at least mixed reviews in 2015 to 2017 to unanimously subpar ever since. And I think it goes without saying he's more of a fringy to subpar level base runner now, but that's really where the negatives stop, because even if Seager has to be moved to a corner at some point during this contract, which he probably will be, his bat is absolutely going to carry his production. Corey Seager, who is still just 27 years old, has a career 132 WRC+, and that's the 17th best mark in the league since 2015 among players with at least 2,500 plate appearances. His career triple slash is an absurd 297, 367, 504, which is about 50 points better in OPS than I thought. And it shouldn't be a surprise, but there's really nothing he doesn't do better than average on offense. In terms of plate discipline, he walks at a rate greater than league average, he strikes out at a rate below league average, and his isolated slugging is comfortably above league average. And over the last couple years, this absence of weaknesses has really unlocked another level for Seager. Over his last 177 games from the start of 2020, including playoffs, his WRC+ is 148, and his triple slash is 300, 377, 553. His counting numbers prorated to 162 games over this period are gaudy and include 38 doubles, 4 triples, 38 homers, 107 runs, and 113 RBIs. Throwing out the playoffs, his WRC+ holds at 148 over the last 2 regular seasons, and that's the 6th best mark for any player with at least 600 plate appearances. So Seager's not just a really good player, it's possible he'd be in the conversation for top 10 if he had been healthier recently. In other words, besides health, based on the progress Seager has made over the last 2 years, plus how players with similar offensive profiles age, Seager's best seasons may still be ahead of him. Looking at his StatCast numbers,
Mr. Seager, I do declare.
They dipped in 2019 on his way back from Tommy John and hip surgeries, but he's since returned to and surpassed his early career numbers, entering, absolute monster territory, setting career best in basically everything over the last 2 years. I think that due to the microscopic future guarantees the Rangers have on the books, this signing makes more sense than the Semien deal in a vacuum, because they're going to get much more prime years from Seager than they are Semien. Now, because of injury history and also because of playing with the likes of Cody Bellinger, Clayton Kershaw, Mookie Betts, really that entire Dodgers roster, Seager somehow feels underrated, and that's despite his production history, his Rookie of the Year, his World Series MVP. And so while $32 million per year may feel like an awful lot, and don't get me wrong, it is, It'd probably take me 10 lifetimes to make that much, but it's not crazy given the current way contracts in baseball work for players like Corey Seager. Like almost all mega deals, the last few years of this contract will probably be pretty awful, but in terms of the near future, the next half decade, Corey Seager should be, if healthy, a premier player, and he significantly increases the chance of an accelerated path to the playoffs for the Rangers. I think the signing is a B- or B. Now, the Kole Calhoun signing. It's a bit more in line with the typical philosophy of a team coming off a 60-win season. Calhoun was injured for a majority of 2021 year and his numbers suffered for it, and the Rangers are hoping for a bounce-back performance from the 34-year-old outfielder. And while the team's outlook has shifted more towards winning with other current signings, a 1-year, $5.2 million deal still doesn't hold any significant risk. Calhoun in his prime was a vastly underrated player and is probably still capable of putting up an average-ish season, which provides much more value than $5.2 million, though that type of production is no longer a lock at this point in his career. His offense has fluctuated wildly over the last 4 seasons, with his WRC plus ranging from 77 to 125. And while he was once a fine hitter against same-side pitching, as evidenced by his 108 WRC plus off of lefties from 2012 to 2016, that is no longer the case, as he's posted a WRC plus of 81 against them from 2017 to 2021. Now there's a bit of minutiae here when it comes to his performance against lefties. Calhoun's actually been okay during the first 4 innings of a game against them, slashing 241, 307, 444, good for a 99 WRC plus. Not great, but the Rangers could work with that.
Furthermore, considering only left-handed fastballs with subpar velocities, things look even better as he's hit 250, 365, 411 off of them, which works out to a better-than-league average line.
As velocity increases league-wide and starters' outings get shorter, that means there are fewer options in which you play Calhoun against lefties, but you think maybe the Rangers let him ride against American League guys like Marco Gonzalez or possibly any of the guys you see on this list here. You'll notice I have 2 columns labeled with a lowercase w and then ch and then a year. These columns represent the linear weights, w, of each of these pitchers' changeups, ch, over the last 2 seasons. This stat basically puts a value on a pitch based off of the cumulative changes in average run expectancy from one count to another. In the simplest terms, the numerical value you see in these 2 columns describes how many runs above or below average these pitchers were with just their changeups over the last 2 seasons. The reason I've included this stat is because Calhoun has been atrocious against left-handed off-speed pitches. Look at this nightmarish line. 061, 162, 152. That's a 314 OPS, and for reference, pitcher's OPS 285 in 2021. So that's something to consider as well. And since we've gone this far, Calhoun has not been as bad against left-handed breaking balls, slashing 202, 246, 415 off them from 2017 to 2021. And while that's probably more granular information than perhaps you want on Kole Calhoun, it's the kind of thing I find absolutely riveting, so I've included it. And I'll be checking to see if Calhoun is receiving starts against any of these soft-tossing lefties, though it's probably best he not face any left-hand relievers as they throw about a tick and a half harder than their starting counterparts. On top of that, Calhoun is going to provide defense that's either second to only Mookie Betts among right fielders over the last 4 years or merely just below average depending on what system you look at. I think outs above average is the way to go for outfielders, but it doesn't hurt to look at all 3 systems. Anyways, like I said, there's just no risk here. It doesn't matter if he's bad. And if he's worth anywhere in the 1.5 WAR vicinity, it's great. So this contract for me is a B. Now onto the pitching side of things.
And the pitching in Texas is a dumpster fire.
The pitchers the Rangers rostered in 2021 that are returning in 2022 combined for a 4.9 ERA, below average K and walk rates, and a home run per 9 well above league average. All told, they tallied negative 0.4 runs allowed per 9 WAR and 2.6 F WAR, and while I think they do have some guys with some upside, adding Jon Gray was a really good idea. Jon Gray is coming out of Colorado, where the run environment during his time there was 1.35, meaning the run scoring environment there was about 35% higher than average. Coors doesn't always top the list, but it does a lot, and when it doesn't, it's always right near the top. Because of this, it would be reasonable to think that Jon Gray's ERA would shrink from its career mark of 4.59 to more closely resemble his ERA estimators, which all peg him for about a half-run lower ERA based on his core skills. The problem here is, and it's no secret, that Jon Gray has actually been better at home over the course of his career. So what's the deal with this? Well, it's possible the Coors hangover effect is in play. And if you don't know what the Coors hangover effect is, simply put, it's a phenomenon that describes how the Rockies hitters' home road splits are so drastic, not just because Coors is such a great place to hit, but also because they grow accustomed to how pitches move in the thin air at Coors compared to how they move at or closer to sea level. A real tidy summary of this would be that pitches move less in Coors, and when the Rockies go on the road, the movement on pitches seems more dramatic, and it makes it harder to hit. And for those of you who are interested in a little more of the nitty-gritty, though none of this crude and possibly flawed physics lesson is imperative to understand the basic knowledge that pitches move less at Coors. But as a ball spins, and let's just use a true 12-6 curveball for this example, and for reference it's moving left to right in this GIF that I pulled from Wikipedia, you'll see the rotation of the ball drags some air around with it, creating different air pressures. The side of the ball spinning with the direction of travel is moving against the air faster. This creates thinner air below the ball, a low pressure zone, or the blue arrow in the GIF, and in turn a higher pressure zone above it, the red arrow, and that's what the ball reacts to. The higher pressure zone pushes on the ball, and the lower pressure zone allows the ball to more easily travel in that direction. This is known as the Magnus effect. And because of the thinner air in Coors, the ball has less air to push away, and in turn there is less air pushing back on the ball in the opposite direction, and thus the pitch thrown will move less. But what the hell does this mean for Jon Gray with regards to his home road splits? Well, while Gray's home numbers have been better overall throughout his career, when Gray is able to make 2 consecutive starts on the road, his numbers are pristine. He sports a 3.02 ERA, 1.1 whip. It's when he has to leave Coors to go on the road that he's had his worst games. 5.64 ERA, 1.62 whip. So it's been said that the Rockies pitchers have to take a different approach when throwing at home, and that they have to start their breaking balls lower in the zone to make up for the lack of drop they receive there. And I'm theorizing that it's very possible that having to constantly alter his approach to accommodate venues was detrimental to Gray's overall line. It is to hitters after all, so why not pitchers? But I don't know. And I wouldn't expect Gray to all of a sudden become a true ace, but as of right now, he's definitely the de facto ace of the Rangers staff. And while that's not saying much, I definitely think that Gray's ERA will look more like his estimators have. And who knows, maybe the move out of Coors will increase the effectiveness of his fastball, or he'll be able to mix in more curveballs and changeups at the expense of his fastball. And this could lead to him being able to unlock another level. Ultimately, it is a fine place to start reworking their rotation, as Gray will only be 30, and $14 million a year for a pitcher with Gray's known talent and theoretical upside is a great deal. So long as his health holds up, I really like this move, and I'm giving this one a B- or a B. So I feel I've made clear the Rangers have a long way to go, but this is a start. And because the Rangers had next to nothing before this spending spree, at the very least, it has to lead to more moves. Because right now they still look like a team who would win 70 some odd games. But new talent is one of the most exciting aspects of baseball, and what makes the offseason so fun and optimistic. Nothing's been played, and you can dream on your team's roster's potential without the sobering reality of actual results. If I'm a Rangers fan, I'm at least excited at the prospect of seeing these new players play. And while I'm not delusional enough to think that the Rangers will be participating in the playoffs next season, this definitely speeds that process up for them. So what's up? Where are my Rangers fans at? What do you guys think about your team's moves? Do you love them? Do you hate them? Let me know in the comments. And take a second to like and subscribe and ring the bell, for more baseball coverage. Also tell me what you think I should cover next, and let's just keep on talking baseball, because baseball.